Good morning, everyone. Welcome to FPC Radio Live. It's Friday, September the 2nd. And, we say it every time we get on the air. We're just that closer and closer to the start of the NFL season. It is coming up. Pretty excited about that. But today, John, we're going to start in a sport that you're quite fond of, and one that we try to talk about as much as possible. And I try and not mention LeBron James, but I'm sure you will certainly be able to work LeBron into this conversation somehow. But Donovan Mitchell has finally been traded, and it is to the Cleveland Cavaliers, John. Your reaction?
Well, I'm hoping LeBron James gets moved there in the next couple of years because I think he'll have a chance to win another championship with the roster they're building in Cleveland. But nonetheless, a surprise yesterday, right? Because we just figured it was going to be Donovan Mitchell going to the Knicks. It was supposed to be there on a silver platter for the Knicks to execute this, and they screwed that up because the Knicks always screw things up.
I was going to say, how many players? I would love to. Maybe this is a segment for another day, but I would love to put together the almost Knicks team, the greatest almost Knicks team of all time. Like all the players that LeBron's on that list. He was going to the Knicks, remember? every New York, every New York Knicks fan was convinced of that 12 years ago. But sorry,
3 years ago, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving were heading to New York, except they went to the Brooklyn Nets, not the New York Knicks. And the biggest free agent that the Knicks have signed over the last 20 years is Amari Stoudemire, who was a consolation prize in 2010 because LeBron went to Miami with Chris Bosh to join Dwayne Wade. And, you could make a case that Amari Stoudemire was a hell of a player. Mm-hmm. But, of those four, he's Ringo's star, right? So, and he had a nice career with the Knicks. But even their draft choices, they continually screw up. I mean, they just extended R.J. Barrett for 4 years, $120 million. It's the first player that they drafted that they gave a second contract to since Charlie Ward in the 1990s. Like in 1999, Charlie Ward got extended. That's the last time they've extended one of their own rookies to a second contract. That's laughable. They've won one playoff series since 1999. They're irrelevant. I mean, they made the playoffs a couple of years ago and it was kind of fun, but they lost in 5 games to Atlanta in the first round. So they're the Knicks, right? And they put this deadline at midnight Monday that unless the trade was made then, it wasn't going to be able to be made because they were going to extend R.J. Barrett. And the machinations of that are very complicated, but it would make it difficult to trade for Donovan Mitchell. Well, Cleveland swooped in, made the deal, and now Cleveland's got a team that's going to be a difficult team to face next year. You've got Darius Garland, who's an all-star. Donovan Mitchell's a 3-time all-star. There's your backcourt. You got Evan Mobley, who I love. He's going into his second year, and I think he's kind of like a Chris Bosh type of player. Not bad if he's your third or fourth best player. And then you got Jared Allen, who also made the all-star team last year. So they've got 2 bigs, 2 really good guards, and hey, LeBron James would fit in nicely, but he just extended in L.A. But, that doesn't mean much in the NBA. You can turn around and say, you know what, I want to go back home and end my career. I doubt that would happen, though.
No, I think we talked about this a little bit, I believe, last week when, around the time that LeBron signed the contract. This was – it seemed like a smart move, even though he had kind of like a presidential term type run with all the teams that he was on. Every 4 years he would campaign somewhere else. But in this case, it just seems like at this point, the way he's going in his career now, again, I don't know, based on, the films that he's done so far, I don't necessarily see a long acting career ahead of LeBron in the future. However, the LA area is certainly creates a lot of opportunities, certainly for superstars like LeBron. So it makes sense for him to stay there. And just again, not, why go to Cleveland? I mean, I get it. I understand he's from that area and I understand. I get it. But I think at this point, I think it's pretty safe to say, John, that he's going to be either with LA or if he does change teams, it's going to be wherever his kids play, if it works out that way. So to me, it's either LA or, again, I mean, if it ends up being Cleveland, then again, that opens that door. But no, back to the trade though. It seemed it just kind of, I don't want to say it came out of nowhere because we've been talking about this forever, but based on everything, the NFL's starting to take over, baseball's getting towards the stretch run, all this other stuff going on, and all of a sudden this trade finally happens. And you're just like, whoa, I forgot about this.
Mhm.
How from a Portland perspective, John? Better, worse, bad trade, good trade?
For Utah?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, what did I say? Portland? Yeah, Utah.
For
Portland, Utah,
Utah, well,
whatever. The
yeah,
Northwest,
out there
the
somewhere.
Midwest,
Yeah.
Northwest, whatever. I've as
Well,
you can see on camera,
Danny,
I'm still having my caffeine this morning, so I'm still
that's all
waking
right.
up.
That's okay. I mean, it's the Danny Ainge connection anyway. I mean, he played at BYU and he's originally from Oregon.
Yep.
So yeah, maybe when he's done with Utah, he'll go run the Portland Trailblazers at some point. He probably would do the same thing he did in Boston, the same thing he's doing in Utah, which is tear it down to the studs, end up with a ton of draft picks. Utah now has 15 first-round picks over the next 7 years. They've given up their two big players in Rudy Gobert to Minnesota and now Donovan Mitchell to Cleveland. So Danny Ainge is just going to go into the draft, and he loves doing that. And could you imagine being in a fantasy league with Danny Ainge? He'd be trading future first-round picks or acquiring future first-round picks for you so you could select someone, and it would be mind-boggling. They must have like 3 guys working at the NBA office who just keep track of all the moves Danny Ainge makes because he makes so many of them.
It's got to be a full-time job.
Without question. They had to do it because once they got rid of Gobert, you could tell they weren't really in on winning right now. So go all the way to the bottom. You have your own first-round picks, and if you're a terrible team, which Utah probably will be for the next couple of years, maybe you strike it rich and win the draft lottery or get a really elite player at number 3, something he did twice running the Celtics when he drafted Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum in back-to-back years. If you can have something like that happen again in Utah, now you start to build there, and then you have all these first-round picks that eventually you can move for established players. So he's tearing it down and rebuilding, so they had to move on from Donovan Mitchell. It's just that it was a surprise that it was Cleveland because we just figured it was New York, although it kind of changed a little bit on Monday when the Knicks extended RJ Barrett, which made this deal to New York much more difficult. And now I think if I'm Donovan Mitchell at first, I'm probably disappointed because you wanted to go back home to New York. But then you look at it and say, I got a great running mate in Darius Garland in the backcourt, and I've got 2 really good bigs in Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. And now you've got some wiggle room maybe to add a wing or 2, and you can contend in the Eastern Conference. Cleveland last year for about 2/3 of the season was hovering around the 4-5 seed. They kind of collapsed at the end because of some injuries, but they're going to contend this year, and that's a pretty interesting thing that they did yesterday.
Well, I'll segue this way, and I'll say, what was more surprising, Mitchell's trade to Cleveland, or Serena Williams advancing at the U.S. Open?
Well, I never bet against Serena, right? Because I mean, she's an all-time great. I mean, she's tough to bet against because when she's out there, she's so competitive and so gifted and so smart that I never would want to bet against her. Now we'll see how far she can advance in this thing. She knocked out the number 2 seed, so that's an impressive showing on Serena's part. And she's playing tonight, and the crowd is going to be going nuts in support of her, and that can carry her to a certain point. But then at some point, the age may kick in. We saw this like 30 years ago with Jimmy Connors. He made it all the way to the semifinals, and then he got absolutely destroyed by Jim Courier in the semifinals. So, I mean, it can take you so far, but I never want to bet against her. She's up there with, Brady, LeBron, and Michael Jordan as the all-time greats in their respective sports. It's amazing. I mean, she's been around so long, Ian. She won her first U.S. Open in 1999. Tom Brady was getting ready for his senior year at Michigan when she won her first major. And I always throw out there that if we want to compare athletes, from different sports, obviously it's an individual sport. She won the Australian Open 5 years ago while pregnant, which I think is pretty cool, right? That's tough to top even for Brady, LeBron, Jordan, and the rest of them. But it wasn't a surprise though that it was Cleveland for Donovan Mitchell. Kind of came out of nowhere, but good for them. They got aggressive, and that's what you have to be in that league. You can't just sit tight and hold on to your assets and hope it all comes together. At times, when a player like Donovan Mitchell, who's an all-star, is available, you go get him. And Cleveland did that yesterday.
Well, and I'm just a segue machine today because that's a perfect way to transition into a team in a sport that saw their guy and went out and got him, and then subsequently gave him a 5-year, $245 million extension to bring him to age 40. And that is Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos. We talked about this a little bit on the Full Press NFL podcast, and if you're interested in listening to that, just search it in your Apple, Spotify, whatever, you'll find it. It's there, and it's also right there on fullpresscoverage.com. We Look, anyone, I like Russell Wilson. I do. I'm not as, I'll clarify this and say I'm not as high on him as some people are. And I think some people think of Russell Wilson as this, like, elite talent. And I don't put him in the same ballpark as some of the guys that he's mentioned. And that's where my, I guess, resistance towards Russell Wilson comes from. So, but in this case, look, we when we talked about this before, Denver needed a quarterback. We've seen them have great quarterbacks in the past. You've mentioned John Elway and Peyton Manning, but there's a lot of Brock Osweilers and Drew Locks and Tim Tebow's mixed in between. So this team, who, despite all that, tends to generally be at the very worst competitive each and every year, have finally got a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Now, this isn't a guarantee in the sense that, we saw Tom Brady go to Tampa and win a Super Bowl, and Tampa was literally the worst franchise winning percentage wise in NFL history. And hadn't, and recently, not just like in the past, but recently, they just had zero success and win a Super Bowl. And I've made the argument that they weren't a quarterback away. They were Tom Brady away from winning a Super Bowl. LA, and not to take anything away from Matt Stafford, because I think he was crucial. He was a key piece in getting them over the hump. That team was more of a quote unquote quarterback away. And when I say that, I mean an elite quarterback, which I believe Matt Stafford is. But, you could probably you put Tom Brady in that situation, they'd probably do the same thing, so on and so forth. And a few other elite quarterbacks could do the same thing. Is Denver that? And is Russell Wilson that?
I think Denver's defense is really good. They're very talented. They've got a good front seven. Their secondary is outstanding. So I think they have a really good defense. They were in a lot of close games that they lost last year. They went 7-10. They've got nice weapons on offense. They can run the football. Their offensive line looks pretty solid. I mean, they're going to get much better quarterback play this year than last year. So can they flip their record around and go 10-7, which I think would be a decent year considering the division they play in? I mean, you're going to play 6 games against teams that are right there with you or better than you: Kansas City, the Chargers, and the Raiders. So it's a tough division. You may see one team go 4-2 within the division and another team go 3-3. I mean, they're going to kind of beat up on each other. I think that Wilson, certainly I would put in the same league as Matt Stafford. I think he's as good, if not maybe slightly better than Matt Stafford. Doesn't turn the ball over quite as much as Stafford, but I put them in a similar sense. But again, when Stafford went to the Rams had made the playoffs 3 out of the last 4 years.
And went to a Super Bowl
just a couple years. Right. I mean, so you nailed it, Ian, by saying they were a good quarterback away from being a Super Bowl team. They didn't need Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, but they needed someone better than Jared Goff, and Stafford's better than Goff, and noticeably better than Jared Goff. He just can do more. Denver, I don't think, has the roster the Rams had. I mean, heck, we saw the top 10 in the NFL, according to the players. 3 of them are from the Rams: Ramsey, Kupp, and of course Aaron Donald. So, I mean, they're loaded talent-wise, and then Stafford put them over the top. Denver's not that good a roster, but I think they'll contend and make the playoffs. But I think they'll be the 6 or 7 seed. I don't think they'll win the division. I think the Chargers are better, and I think the Chiefs are better, partially because I think the Chargers and Chiefs have better quarterbacks. As good as Russell Wilson is, I'm taking Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes over him right now. So I think they'll contend, make the playoffs, but I don't expect them to get to the Super Bowl the way Tampa did 2 years ago, the way the Rams did last year. I don't think their roster is as good as the Rams, and certainly no one's Tom Brady in terms of turning franchises around like he did 2 years ago, which is still, I mean, I still can't believe what he did 2 years ago. I mean, that is just amazing.
Well,
what Brady did.
I can believe it because he did it before with the Patriots. Not to that extent, but 5-11 team in 2000, 0-2 before he starting.
Yeah.
And 11-3, rest is history. Yeah. And you look at you look at Tampa, and it's like, John, they had before Tom Brady came to Tampa, they had 6 postseason victories in their entire history since 1976. Like 10
Amazing.
years before I was born. And Tom has 5 in 2 years. 5.
Right. Yeah.
So, again, it's Tom and the Bucks. Okay, folks, in case anyone out there gets a little worked
Well,
up
you're on a
about.
first name basis.
Yeah,
with Tom
well,
and the
you know.
Bucks, you know.
Well, I'm on a first name basis with him. I don't know if he even knows who I am, but that's a sad discussion for another
Well, he
day.
might be moving in with you pretty soon. I mean, I don't know
Well,
what's going on with the Brady Giselle household.
oh
So,
man, see, you got on the Segway bandwagon, and now we're just rolling with these
yes,
segues. This was just a Segway-filled show because this is our
it's
last segment.
contagious.
It is. It's
Very
really contagious. Obviously, the talk of mid-August was the absence of Tom Brady from Buccaneers training camp. And look, everyone had their theories. What did he do? Was he on the Masked Singer? Was he going on a trip to on vacation or whatever? And there was a report yesterday, I believe it was in the New York Post and TMZ. So again, take it with a grain of salt. I say that about the New York Post. I mean, ironically, TMZ, especially when it comes to sports, has somewhat been a, dare I say, fairly reputable source of information.
Yes.
But anyways, they reported, and look, I mean, I'm not. I mean, it makes sense that there might be a little bit of marital discord between Tom Brady and Giselle Bundchen. And look, do I think it's possible? Absolutely, absolutely. We've talked about this dynamic of his and of Brady's and how he's navigated work and life and family and all this, and to continue to do what he does at such a late age, relative to a football career. There's no doubt this takes a strain on Giselle. I mean, she said publicly, I mean, she hasn't come out and like hounded him in public and been like very vocal about it, but there's been several comments over the last few years that gives you a little bit of insight into what she's thinking, and that is she'd prefer him probably not play anymore. And look, he retired and unretired, and there was a lot of theories about that concerning trying to hold out and go to the Dolphins. And I said it at the time, John. I think he just changed his mind. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what happened, where he got home and he realized, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to hang him up. And this is a guy that, for all his greatness on the football field, he's admitted it himself. He's a flawed human being, just like all of us. So, like, can you look at it as being a little bit selfish? Sure. But, at the same time, like, I sympathize with him? Sure, absolutely. Because like you think about, the great thing about sports, but the bad thing about sports is, with a significant amount of your time, your lifetime left, you're not going to be able to do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, this isn't,
Mm-hmm.
you can't play professional football until your retirement age of 65. That, oh well, I mean, let's wait to see when Tom Brady retires. But generally, you believe you can't play football till the age of 65. If things get worse between he and Giselle and they split, well, guess what? He's probably going to play football until he's 65. So, but you know what I'm saying? Like, at a certain point, and for many people, their careers end long before their lives expire. You know what I mean? Like, their
Mm-hmm.
expected life expectancy. So there's a tough transition that not every athlete handles well. And you've talked about it quite a bit actually with Brady. Like, what is he going to do when he finally hangs him up? Well, he's got this sweet TV deal lined up, and kind of all these other things, but none of that actually replaces playing the game of football, which clearly he's obsessed with. Clearly he knows is coming to an end, and clearly he's hanging on, not in a desperate way, because generally we see athletes hang on in a desperate attempt to regain what they once had. He's hanging on, but he's still great. So it's kind of easy, So I believe there's something there's got to be an issue. I mean, Giselle can't be happy with his decision. She can't be 100% behind his decision to come back. I mean, to me, I just can't see that being a possibility.
No, I mean, obviously there's the time constraints. There's also health concerns. I mean, he's 45 years old, and football players are one hit away from, having their lives altered, right? I mean, if something happens, that changes him going forward. So that's something that I think even Peyton Manning's wife was finally like, you got to stop playing because, you're one hit away from maybe being in a wheelchair. So you want to, make sure that doesn't happen, because these guys have all the money in the world. They can do whatever they want. So enjoy it. They put their time in. And like you said, Ian,
I don't want to interrupt you, but you just said it right there. They can do whatever they want. And that's the
absolutely.
And this is what, and for him, this is what he wants. So I think that's obviously the big thing there. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, he's addicted to it. And the thing about Brady, and I think the same thing with Manning, Brett Favre was a little bit different, but Manning and Brady, I think they like the process too, right? I mean, they love the games, the competitiveness, but the camaraderie with the teammates and studying film and talking to the coaches and, working with the players. I mean, they love that whole process. They're like an obsessed director who, eats, drinks, sleeps the film they're making. Brett Favre was a little bit different. He'd take the off season literally off, drink beers on the tractor at the farm in Mississippi, and then show
steal
up to
welfare
camp when
money.
He felt like it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, steal welfare money. Yeah, do whatever was necessary to do. He had some idle time on his hands, and then show up to camp and start hucking the ball around. I mean, he was just a different animal than those two guys. Those two guys are like obsessive personalities. So yeah, what do you fill that with once you are no longer the quarterback of whatever team? I mean, you get into ownership. Okay, that's great, but how much can you be competitive with that? You get into broadcasting. What's the competition there? Am I going to get better ratings on Fox than Troy Aikman did the last 20 years? I mean, what's the competition?
Yeah.
So, you have to fill that. And some of these guys, once they retire, they're lost. I mean, if you saw the Lombardi documentary on HBO, which is one of the best I've ever seen, he retired after the 67 season as the coach, and he stayed on as the general manager. He was lost. Mm-hmm. Like, he was going to practice, but he didn't want to butt in because he was no longer the coach. And his family said he was miserable. Like, he just didn't have anything to do. Like, you're obsessed with being a coach. And those are similar personalities, Lombardi and Brady and Manning and all these guys that are just, married to what they do. So, yeah, I mean, he wants to keep playing, and he should, because he's playing at a ridiculously high level. It's not like he's hanging on, like you said. But, there's also a life-work balance that he's going to have to figure out with Giselle. And, again, she's a dominant personality in her own right. It's not like she doesn't need Tom Brady, and Tom Brady doesn't need her to pay the bills.
Exactly.
They're both pretty self-sufficient at this point.
Well, and look, I mean, the age of his kids is kind of a factor too. They're, his oldest is what, like 14, 15, something like that. Right. So, they're getting into that point in life where it's like, you don't have that many years. I mean, his daughter's still fairly young, so it's like they have plenty, time with her. But, these kids are getting older, and this kind of goes back to, this idea that, and I brought this up a while ago, people talking about, a guy like Patrick Mahomes playing into his 40s. And I'm like, look, he's already going on his second child at his age. There's not a chance in the world he's going to play into his 40s. I mean, Tom was kind of a late bloomer when it came to becoming a parent. Like, I believe it was, at, post, obviously, 2007, so in his 30s. So it was relatively later in his career. Patrick Mahomes' kids are going to be Tom Brady's ages, the age of his kids before he hits 40. So, I mean, I think, that's certainly something that at first had benefited Tom in the sense that he didn't have that family growing early in his career, but has now become a factor because, well, again, and if you're looking from Giselle's point of view, it's like, okay, you're first of all, she's been taking care of the kids for, his entire career that they've been together.
The nannies have.
Well, but she's obviously been, because she hasn't, I think she just started working more recently, but she hasn't been, she wasn't what she was when let's say she was dating Leo, and she was under that 25-year-old.
Right. She got
that that DiCaprio line. You know how we have the Mendoza line? We got the DiCaprio line. It's right at 25. That's a fascinating study that I'm glad people recognized, and we were able to trace the pattern. It's pretty fascinating. But anyways, like,
well, Leo has to play Tom Brady in the movie anyway because he's got institutional knowledge, right? You would think. But,
well, you would think, but I don't know I don't know if it's going to line up that way. I might I'm going to throw my hat into the ring for playing Tom Brady. It'll be my
I think that's a good idea.
Be my
Joe
moment.
Burrow,
the
Joe Burrow story is what you're going to play,
right.
which is very good.
But yeah, so anyway, she wasn't obviously working, and she took on more of the responsibility of being the parent, obviously, than Tom did. So, again, I get it. This, like, people think, and again, sometimes it's easy to separate, athlete, superstar, famous person from normal everyday people. But these athletes have the same issues that every other person has. I mean, how many movies or how many things are movies or shows are made about the husband working too much, and it's causing discord at the family. They're not home for dinners and stuff like that. It's the same thing, if not to a more extreme extent, because of literally how far away they can be for a lot of the time, especially during the season. So yeah, I mean, look,
although I think you could pull that off with football maybe more than any other sport, only because the off season's pretty long. So, he's around from, say, February through.
Well, not for Tom. Usually he's playing
July.
into February.
Well,
so.
But I'm saying, like, after
he
wins another Super Bowl, he's got like 4 months or 5 months where there's not a lot. I mean, there's mini camp, and it's, you're living close by. So it's not like he's in there 24 hours a day. The coaches have to put more time in. And look, with technology, Brady can do a lot of stuff late at night.
I'd say mentally he's in there 24 hours a day, and that's a problem.
Oh, God, too. Yeah. He's probably a guy that, you may be having a conversation with, and he's staring off into space worrying about what defense the Packers are going to be in next week. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, he's obsessive. It's made him great. He can just show up and start hucking footballs around. He's put all that time in. But, yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. He doesn't look very happy at this point, right? I mean, it just doesn't look like he's all in this. So I'm just worried because I think he's a guy that has to be all in because that's the way he's always been. And I think he will be. But, it just doesn't look like there seems to be something going on, that doesn't have him in a really good place now. But again,
that's the thing.
He's another guy. Like I said about Serena, I wouldn't bet against him either. So.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. At this point, I mean, the guy has had every outside obstacle to deal with, and still has managed to focus on football. So I think he's great at compartmentalizing, and obviously focusing on football is obviously the key to all that. So we'll see how it plays out. But football season starts soon, so I'm excited. That's it for us today. That's it for us this week, and we will be back next week. Potentially with a little bit different background behind me. Things are moving along. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Head over to fullpresscoverage.com, fullpresshockey.com, so on and so forth. Check it out. Go over to my bookie, use that code press22. Get some extra dough for your betting needs. So thank you everyone, and we will talk to you on Monday.